Hi all, my name's Phil Moore. I'm a partner in and manage the services delivery for niche Australian cybersecurity organisation Avantguard. I'm also a member of the Active Cyber Defence Alliance, the ACDA for short, and assist the steering committee and regularly contribute content to the ACDA. I'd encourage you to go to the ACDA website or search Google or Bing for Active Cyber Defence and click on the acda.group website link. This is where we provide active cyber defence knowledge resources, including discussion papers and submissions to both Australian federal and state government agencies and parliamentary inquiries. All information published through the ACDA is provided under the Creative Commons licence. Anyone is free to use it under the terms of that licence, which are also available on the website. So I'm posting this short video presentation, which is about 20 minutes long, as a contribution to and to solicit further discussions through Q&As with the ACDA followers and members. The structure of today's webinar will be for me to walk through about 8 slides. Firstly, I'll review what we mean by data loss intelligence, and then give an overview of the specific use case, which is in relation to detecting loss or leakage of sensitive data across a supply chain when sharing that sensitive information between separate entities. And particularly where NDAs are involved. After that, I'll provide an introduction as to who the ACDA is and the approaches that we use to describe active cyber defence. They're based on a 4-pillar model, and we'll talk about those in that slide. I'll review what we mean by cyber intelligence and the active techniques and tools that we might adopt for this specific use case, which is described in the presentation. And then I'll work through the enablement of those techniques and tools. Given this is a fairly short webinar, I'm describing these techniques at a very high level and just showing the basic enablement of those techniques and tools used, and specifically for this use case. I obviously can't go into any specific details about our customers or any specific outcomes for this particular use case, so I'll be really talking about this example as a hypothetical. That said, I'd see the loss of sensitive documents or data leakage across a supply chain as a reasonably common use case. So the use case I'm discussing today is all about gathering intelligence for understanding data loss or data leakage or exfiltration, however, whatever term you want to use to describe it, with the intention of trying to understand what tools and techniques we could propose to gather those classic intelligence parameters for the what, who, where, and when. Probably in this case, it's more the who than anything. And we often hear on the media this statement made by an executive of a large organisation after it's come to light that their organisation has been compromised or impacted by a cyber incident. Or maybe they've been outed by another organisation in their supply chain. The marketing spin is there is no evidence that any data has been stolen. Well, plainly, if there are no tools or systems in place in that organisation that identifies data loss or data leakage or exfiltration, then of course there won't be any evidence. They simply have no way of knowing. I certainly roll my eyes when I hear this, as do many of my peers in the industry, and so should all of us. It's a meaningless marketing spin in an attempt to really deflect from the truth and possibly to placate shareholders. So when we're talking about intelligence, we're really trying to understand those standard parameters, to gain the knowledge of who, what, where, and when. And that's our starting point. We look at what the use case is and determine what techniques and tools we might deploy to try and build that knowledge. So let's just set the scene for this use case. Here we're talking about a scenario where there was some circumstantial evidence that sensitive confidential information in documents that had been distributed between a number of law firms had been leaked. These documents related to the acquisition of a publicly listed company, that is a company that's being traded on the national securities market or stock exchange. And here, the sending party, the law firm that was negotiating the terms of that acquisition, believed that price-sensitive information had been leaked. Now, I'm not going to go into why they may have come to that view, but if they did take that view, there are some serious legal ramifications which may also trigger reporting obligations to Australian authorities, such as the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, it's ASIC, or the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, that's APRA, or even to state and federal police. Those legal ramifications are fairly obvious and include breaches of NDAs and legal remedies, the possibility of insider trading and potential prosecution of those responsible, and other serious breaches of trust and controls around confidentiality breaches from a reputational perspective. So for this specific use case, we might propose the following active cyber techniques. Digital forensic watermarks, such that we can place a watermark in a document that is linked to the recipient of that document. That might help with identifying any document screenshots that are found publicly in the wild, for example, on social media or sent through a messaging app. And potentially identify a copy and paste from that watermark document in an accessible email that might have become available through further investigations by the authorities. We'd also include document traces and embedded links to other online sources, such that we can capture metadata about that connecting device. We use a cloud-based data loss intelligence platform that allows us to associate the tracer documents with the recipient of a document. Those traces, again, will trigger an alert when the document is accessed and opened. And that metadata is captured from the connecting device. As an example, if you want to see what metadata is available when your device connects to a website, I'd suggest you go to privacy.net, point your browser to that website and run some analytics, and it will show you all the metadata that you're exposing. Obviously, it's going to provide an IP address from the device that the document was opened. That IP address gives us some geolocation information at a fairly high level, and we can potentially get that and do some more analysis to get more accurate location. Other metadata is available from that device that opened the document. Again, go to the website privacy.net and you'll get an understanding of the type of information that's available. So the service also searches deep and dark web sources for the document signature that is associated to each of the documents. And if it's found in the wild, such as on a pastebin site, then we'll see an alert and the location of where it's been found. So a big disclaimer, there's no guarantees for the success of any of these techniques. In this particular use case, we're not necessarily suspecting sophisticated threat actors to be involved. We're really just trying to gather intelligence, which would probably be related to a opportunistic circumstance. Might have been someone who had access to the device or the recipient's device that shouldn't have, or it could be one of the recipients was down the pub one night and having a conversation, had too many beers and some loose lips let out some information that shouldn't have been discussed. Sophisticated actors obviously would use counterintelligence approaches to counter our intelligence and significantly reduce our success rate. So what I'm going to show you now is a screen share of what a digital watermark might look like in an office document from the perspective of how we introduce this for this use case. This is just done manually. We could use techniques to automate this using various approaches, but really if there's just a small number of recipients, say less than 10, we'd do this manually. So this text-based watermarking approach is done such that each recipient would receive a document with their own unique watermark. We use this approach, which is changing the kerning of the text, so that we have some forensic reference information about where the text resides on between the lines above and below. And we do this so that we don't actually change the content of the document, because the document might just continually be used and edited in the normal process of the engagement. So the document I'm going to use here is just a synthetic document. It's just a made-up example, but it's representative of the type of content that we would see in this use case. I'll just make a copy of the text so we have some reference text. We would keep a reference document isolated, and that document wouldn't be distributed. Obviously, we need to keep a reference for what the original document looked like, so that we can compare it to any of those treated documents. So now we have a reference with the original text, and I'll manually introduce a small section where we slightly expand the kerning to introduce the watermark on that copied text. So you can see that we've now got a reasonably effective, albeit a low-tech approach in the watermarking of that copied text to distinguish it from the original. So we can just have a look at that. I'll just create introduce a little box that has a vertical line that actually we can line up with the text, and we can see on the original text, you can see the I and the L still visible on the original. And then if we were to go down to the copied text to see where the watermark is, and we do the same thing there, where we have a look at the, just introduce the box and show the difference, we can see the I is now covered and the line above. So low tech, but effective. The benefit of this approach is it doesn't affect the literal content of the document, so that it can continue to be used in an operational sense, but also it appears to survive copy and paste from that area, that including the digital watermarking, into different Office applications. For example, if someone was to copy the watermark text into an email and send it on to another party, any further investigations by the authorities that were to potentially gather those emails in evidence, it's highly likely that we could forensically examine that to identify the origin of the document. The document was sent, and therefore the recipient that received that document. So let's just try a couple of those examples. We'll just cut and paste from the watermarked text, and then paste that into an email and send it on to another recipient. As the recipient, if I receive that and then cut that and paste that into the document, and we just highlight the area that we know was watermarked, we can see that it's survived the copy and paste. So we can see that it's got the kerning expanded in that area of the text that we originally expanded it. So we can do the same thing for obviously a screen capture of that area. If we do a screen capture and then paste that screen capture back into the document, we can see, if we do some analysis on it, we can see that it's as you'd expect, that we can still forensically examine it and determine that watermark from that particular watermark from the original. There's no guarantees that these watermarks will survive copy and paste, but we've found that it's much better than other techniques. And the beauty is, of course, that the literal content of the document is intact. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how we're going to add a tracer to a file using the application. So we've got our application where we'll upload the file. We'll provide some descriptive details to that file. In this case, we might add, for the description, we might add the particular recipient name that's going to get this file. Now, this file obviously has those forensic watermarks in it. So this is going to indicate that any traces that get alerted for this particular file will give us an idea of the location from the metadata that we get of where it was opened, etc. And we can change details. As you can see, we can get a bit of a preview of that file, and here you can see that we're going to configure. It's got a digital signature hash that's already configured, and it's going to have a canary or a tracer added to it, and we can generate that file. And then once we've generated it and it's gone through the process to generate that file, we can then download that file and deploy it. So you can see we've got it ready to deploy up in the right-hand corner. Once we've actually sent it, we'll click on that, and that file will be deployed, and any traces that get alerted to us will be notified in this application. So we'll download the original file. You can encrypt it. We're not going to encrypt it. We're just going to download the original and send it. And then what I'll do is I'll demonstrate opening the file, and I'll come back into the application and I'll show you where we've got some alerts happening within the application. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to demonstrate what we see from the perspective of an alert when the file's open. So we're going to set the file as deployed. We're going to send it in an email, and we're going to, or the recipient's going to access that file from the location that they receive it, and we'll have a look at the alert that we receive when that happens. There you go. You can see there's an alert, and the location is in this case, it's going to be the gateway address of the person's internet access. In this case, it's I think pretty sure it's a Telstra gateway. So that's that's where it's going to show from. So as I said, it's a fairly generic view of the location, or it's a very broad view of the location, and we can see the IP address that's there. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope you found this use case for the use of active cyber techniques and tools for data loss and data exfiltration or leakage useful to you. These tools have been available for law enforcement agencies for some time. Also, the military has most likely been using them. And the interesting thing is that we often find with peers in the industry that they're not aware of these tools being available. And they're now filtering down into the commercial space, and we're seeing a lot of interest for specific use cases, including the one we explained today, but also, for example, if you had intellectual property in documents or files on your network that people had access to, even people that are supposed to have access to them, but if those people were potentially to leave your organisation and exfiltrate some of that information going to a competitor, then of course these tools would be useful in understanding that data exfiltration. Interestingly, we've also had organisations reach out to us to suggest that the use of these types of tools in terms of traces in documents is on shaky legal ground. Our advice from legal specialists and practitioners in the cyber industry is that you have every legal right to protect your assets, and not only do you have every legal right to protect your assets, but under legislation, as a company director, you are obliged to protect your organisation's assets. So our view is that there's no legal impediment to using these tools from the advice that we've had. And look, thank you for the time if you've got this far. I appreciate that. And if there's any questions, just please reach out to me or post them in the comments below. So in the original agenda, I had the following section earlier on in the slides. I've moved them because we plan to post more active cyber defence techniques through the Active Cyber Defence Alliance. And so this next section is really probably going to repeat itself through future presentations. So it's up to you whether you watch that, or if you've already watched it, you can skip it. So thanks, and all the best. So who is the ACDA? The ACDA is a special interest group who focuses on raising awareness of the active approaches to cyber defence. The ACDA defines cyber defence as cyber intelligence gathering along with active threat hunting and techniques and tools to more effectively expose and elicit malicious actors and activities than you would be able to do with typical conventional perimeter-based practices, which we refer to as passive defence. Passive defence includes things like network segmentation, firewalls, antivirus, identity and access management controls, endpoint protections, and cyber safe user hygiene practices. That's not to say that passive defence isn't necessary. Of course it is, it's essential, but we believe it's insufficient in today's threat landscape. The ACDA has adopted this 4-pillar model of cyber defence, and we position the techniques within each of those pillars. These are described by Major General Marcus Thompson. Marcus has had a long and successful career in the Australian Army, culminating in a 4-year appointment as the head of information warfare for the Australian Defence Force as Major General. He's also on the board of a number of Australian organisations, such as Macquarie Telecom. He's on the board of one of Australia's leading cybersecurity organisations, Pen10, and he's a keen supporter of more active approaches to cyber protection and speaks regularly on this topic at public speaking engagements and through those leadership roles to lift Australians and Australia's cyber defence. So on the left in the green, we have self-defence. Self-defence is the pillar that relates to your organisation's training and awareness programs and is really about user cyber self-hygiene. It's regularly part of your training and awareness programs within your organisation. It ensures that staff understand the threats that are very relevant to your organisation. For example, not clicking on links in emails and messages, and being aware of good, safe online practices.